Hello. This clip of our Justia webinar dedicated to technical SEO for law firm websites will go through one of the most important elements Google focuses on, usability and core web vitals. If you want to see more Justia videos on law practice and legal marketing, be sure to subscribe to our channel.
That was the basic stuff for setting up websites and getting things going. Just nothing super fancy there. Most law firms have it. Again, the big thing to watch out there is that your non-secure website's not redirecting properly to your secure one. That's the one that I see pop up quite a bit. Okay, now a big item, usability and core web vitals. So this is something that Google's really focused on right now. So this is really important. All right, we're going to start off with core web vitals. Then I'll talk a little bit about accelerated mobile pages and a brief discussion about WordPress and plugins. Okay, here's Justia's homepage. I'm going to run it through a tool that Google has, Google PageSpeed tool. And I'm just going to put our homepage in here, and it's going to give me sort of review of our homepage. The same thing you could do to your pages on your website. You can also do it with your competitors' pages, see how your competitors are doing. You can do it basically to anybody. Right? This is a tool that's open for you to check any URL that you want to check. It's going to check one single page. So the first thing, there's mobile and desktop. For the most part, for rankings, mobile is more important than desktop. Okay, you want to be doing well on both, but normally if you're doing well on mobile, you almost always do well on desktop, but focus on the mobile results here. This is what matters, the core web vitals, all right? So this says core web vitals passed. This is the real measurement Google's using right now in terms of whether your site's going to rank well or not, is how well it does on the core web vitals. These other items here, performance, accessibility, best practices, SEO, these are diagnostic tools that might give you some opportunities to improve your site so that you can pass core web vitals. But these are just tools and measuring it at a point in time. So it's just like doing a test. Do a quick test of your site, see if there's anything that you can get to fix up. Some things you might want to fix. There might be reasons you don't want to fix other items. Some things you might not be able to fix, right? It's a third-party script like Google Tag Manager. But the core thing to note here is that the core web vitals is what matters. And here's the sort of the desktop version, same thing, right? Scores tend to be a little higher on desktop. This is the messaging that came out. This is from a little while ago. It was asked whether to John Mueller, who works at Google, does Google PageSpeed still matter anymore, or is it all core web vitals? And the answer, it's all core web vitals now. Okay, so just you got to focus on that, and we'll sort of describe what these different elements are in a second. And one of the reasons it's core web vitals is the test is a test at a point in time. You could do the test later, your scores will change, right? Or it could change. Core Web Vitals is based on real user information. This is actual people using the Chrome browser on phones and on desktop computers and what their actual experience is like. So this is real world experience, and Google cares about the real world experience a lot more than they care about the test. Tests are for helping you, make improvements. The real world experience is the thing that you have to pass. So that's sort of a core item on that. All right. So here's the core web vitals thing. What are these different elements? There's three different elements. There's largest contentful paint. We'll look at this on the mobile phone in a second. There's first input delay, and there's cumulative layout shift. So you're going, great. Well, what's that? All right. So let's walk through each of these so you have an idea what they are. So you're coming in, you're on your mobile phone, right? The user's on their phone. The largest contentful paint is just looking at the initial page that you come in on the phone. So here's Stanford's homepage, right? You could scroll through here. There's probably 50 pages of I could keep scrolling. I can see a bunch of different pages here. Google's not concerned about that for largest contentful paint. They're only worried about what shows up when you first load the page. All right, that's it. Now what's lower on the page here? And what they're focused on is what takes up the biggest space on that page. Not the stuff at the top, not the stuff at the bottom. What takes up the biggest chunk of space? A lot of times that's a photo. Sometimes it's a text area. But it's whatever takes up the most. Because what they've seen is that users' experience is based on what they see in that biggest chunk of real estate that's on that screen the first time you load the page. So that's what largest contentful paint is. It's the biggest chunk of stuff. Often on law firm websites, often they'll be your header photo. So on your homepage. So having that photo optimized will actually help you do better here, even if the rest of your page is optimized. So you got to sort of think those things through. So that's largest contentful paint. right? Just on the first screen when you load the page. There is a site called web.dev that Google has that will explain more details to you how to make this a better experience for users and how to optimize it. The short answer is try to get the item that shows up and takes up the most space on that first page to be the first thing that loads on the page, right? Try to get that to load immediately, or at least at the same time as other elements. Don't delay the loading of that element to after other items have loaded. So try to make that load as fast as possible, because that's how you're going to be judged, is how fast that loads for users. All right, but then, web.dev can walk through that for your developer. I mean, not for the lawyers, probably. I mean, unless you want to read it, you can read it certainly. And it has a bunch of different explanations there. Okay, that's the first one. You come in, what's the biggest chunk? Next one, first input delay. All right. Well, that is when you first click on something on the website. You come into the website, you're on it. Just the first click, not the second click, not the third click, just the first click, whatever you decide to do. Maybe you're clicking a link, maybe you're clicking a navigation item, whatever that first click, how fast is it? How responsive is it? And what happens is sometimes people will have different things running and you click on something and it doesn't show up right away. So in this case, for Justia, if I click, this little navigational hamburger menu, how fast does that respond? Is it really, really fast? Right? Might depend on a couple of things. Sometimes people have so many things in their menus, it doesn't work well. Sometimes they have little JavaScript stuff that's tracking different things. Sometimes they've got, analyzer scripts that are tracking how everybody moves the mouse, and that delays everything. Try to, especially on the first page here, that it shows up above the fold, try not to have that stuff load, and you do not want that stuff interfering with people interacting with your site. If people click on things on your website and it's slow, it's a bad experience. And they've really just focused on the first one. The second, the third, certainly there's value there, but that's not what Google's focused on. It's the first time they touch anything on your website, how responsive is it? It needs to be fast, all right? It needs to be quick. And they measure that by trying to figure out when you actually complete the task within the browser, looking at the sort of the memory usage and the scripting that's going on. You click on something, if the other site that you're clicking to is slow, and Google can see that's the outside site, that's not going to harm you. But if it's slow, you click on it, and then you're processing stuff before you actually take them to the outside URL, that's on you. That's slow for you, and you got to make that fast. So first input delay, make that very, very short. Your site has to be very, very fast when they click on something. Same thing, web.dev has a whole page on it. It gives you a whole understanding of it for your developer. So web.dev is a great site, and it'll walk through all these different items and give you some suggestions and ways to sort of solve it. The big thing here is don't get in the way of interactions with people. Last one. And there's only these three that are determining the Core Web Vitals measurement, right? So we got, the biggest paint area. It's got to be very fast when someone clicks on something. The last one is cumulative layout shift. And what this is someone clicks on something and everything moves around. Like law.com, right? I law.com, I load up their site. I click on something and suddenly everything moves down, right? Because they're running an ad at the top. It's not immediate. It's not like they load the ad and load the page, in this case, everything just sort of loaded. The page loaded, 1, 2, boom, everything shifted down. That's a bad user experience. So you don't want things moving around a lot, especially on this first part right here above the fold in the, the initial view of the page, right? Maybe things are moving down lower on, but when you get this initial part of the page, this has to be nice and smooth and not moving around. In this case, it was ads. A lot of times you'll see people have fonts. They have custom fonts coming in and they don't match it up with the same size or default font. And the fonts come in and suddenly everything shifts around with fonts. Or they're moving, they're running some plugin and suddenly it's bringing in some other element into the page and suddenly it appears into the page, it jumps in. Or you don't have the width and height around some of your images and suddenly it suddenly expands out and your whole page sort of shifts around. So cumulative layout shift is a big deal for users because when things move around the page unexpectedly, that's a bad experience. So you got to make sure things don't move around, especially on that first page that loads up. All right. So those are the three things. So you yourself as a lawyer can take your phone, you can look at your phone and see how your site, you get a basic idea how it responds when you're looking at it, and then go check it out with the Google Page Speed tool. Just type Google Page Speed tool into Google and you'll get there and put your website in and just see how it works with your own phone. See what your own experience is. And then if you need to fix things, just fix them. All right. But it's the stuff that's in that initial screen that shows up that matters. Same thing. There's a whole page on web.dev on this. All right. So you can sort of follow through on that. So it's very straightforward. Okay. Core Web Vitals. That's what you need to pass. There's this expanded view here that you can expand out because it's, sort of giving averages here. This will actually give you a breakdown a bit on users overall for the page. How many people had a good experience, how many people had a need improvements experience, how many people had poor. Sometimes the poor experience might be they had a odd connection that delayed something loading. It's not always your own website, but you want to try to make almost everything in the good range here. So even the stuff we're passing, it's like 93, 94% had the good experience. So, but there's certainly, it's not 0% had a slightly bad experience or needs improvement or even a poor experience for a few things. So that's just something to note. You can get a little more information there. Okay, let's look quickly here at the test stuff and just sort of walk through these items because this will give you a couple other things to think about. So it used to be that the page speed was the big thing that was focused on this page, but now it's Core Web Vitals, and then these test things are really just to give you suggestions on things you need to improve. So performance is the first one, and this will give you ideas of how you can make your page faster, how things things can go a little bit quicker, but little things that you might be able to optimize, sometimes images, sometimes scripts. So that's this core part here. And again, I focus on mobile first, and then I do desktop. So if you're looking at the two, mobile's going to count a bit more. And here are some opportunities and diagnostics here. And I can take these, I can expand them out, and it'll give me some suggestions as to things I can improve. Maybe I want to run my style sheets, especially in that top part, right within the HTML page. So I don't have to load a separate file. It says I could optimize the Google Tag Manager JavaScript, right? That could be made a little bit smaller, right? There's some different items here that could be fixed up. So you can use this as diagnostic tools to get some suggestions. It doesn't mean you need to take them all, right? There might be reasons you're doing different things that are outside of the pure speed performance of your site, but it will give you a list of items to check out, all right? Which is fine. One other thing, I mentioned this before. These tests, these are point-in-time tests. You can run these tests over and over again, and you will get different scores and different things will show up. So here we had an 85. I ran it again, I got a 90. All right, like 10 minutes later, this is the same thing. The page didn't change at all. So you run it through, and then you might run it, check for things, run it again, check for things. We were as high as a 93. We went down as low as a 79 when I checked it, but it sort of jumps up and back. But I chose 85, so I get a number of things I could show you. When I ran a 90, I didn't have quite as many items to sort of show when I highlighted it. But again, you can check it a few times. It's a test. Google's not scoring you based on this test. Google is using this test to give you suggestions. I will say that there are some plugins that are being used on WordPress. There are some website developers, including those for law firms, that when you run this test, they will hide certain elements that are not being tested. I don't think that's helpful. So that's something to note. Two things that will always impact your scores that you shouldn't worry about. One is Google Analytics. The other is Google Tag Manager. All right. So both these things, they're both great things to use. Analytics is a great tool for checking your traffic, right? It's really good. I mean, they're running it for lots of folks. Most law firms don't have crazy number of pages or crazy number of traffic. So the free version is going to work great for you. You're going to get a lot of data from Google Analytics. Google Tag Manager, it's the best way right now to really control all the different scripts coming to your site. Might be, maybe your analytics can be in there. Maybe you're doing some Google ads. You can bring that in there. You might have some chat software, Facebook, Bing. You can bring all that in through Google Tag Manager. So you have a nice, easy way to control all these third-party scripts. If you run the test and you're running the test on Google PageSpeed and you hide Google Tag Manager, like some of these SEO folks have been doing to get higher performance scores, you're not going to realize what the issues are that you could improve on some of these other third-party scripts. And like we've worked many times with different folks doing chat scripts to help them improve their chat scripts because they were slowing down the site and explaining to them what they needed to do and how to optimize it, how to get to run for AMP pages, right? We've got a lot of engineers at Justia, so we've helped folks out on that. But you wouldn't even know it if you didn't test it. So you always want to test everything. And you want to make sure you're passing the Core Web Vitals. The worst thing you can do is have a high score on the test and you fail Core Web Vitals. It's not helpful at all, especially if the reason you got the high score is because you just basically hit stuff. So don't do that. Use the testing for what it is there, diagnostics tool. Make sure you pass Core Web Vitals. That's real people, real information. I cannot reiterate that enough. That's what matters. Other scores, not nearly that big a deal. All right, a couple other items here. Best practices. We'll list some things that you should do for your site. It's pretty straightforward. SEO. In this case, we got dinged because we had one link that said read more. Could have been more descriptive. Okay, fine. That's SEO. Might give you some suggestions. Getting 100 on this SEO, it's not SEO. All right. SEO is what we've covered in these 4 webinars. Great content, how to do linking, how to find new opportunities for linking, and getting your basic technical SEO down. Read more. Maybe if I said read more news, it would have been fine. But I like the 2-word link is the reason we had it. But you can look through this. But if you get 100 in SEO and you're not ranking high, it's a small, tiny component of technical SEO, not even the full component. Focus on Core Web Vitals first. This part a little bit less meaningful. Finally, going back to Google Search Console again. We'll cover this in more detail later as a whole. But that's checking one page using this Google Page Speed tool, right? That takes time, right? It's a bit of time to do that. You could go to Google Search Console and you could check your entire, all your pages of your site for Core Web Vitals, and it'll give you an overall measurement. So here I'm doing answers.justia.com. Everything was green, which is why I chose this one. Here it is for mobile. Here it is for desktop. But if I had some reds and yellows, I could actually see them, and it would give me some examples. It's not necessarily going to give me every single one that's red or every single one that's yellow, but it give me some examples of things I could fix. And often for a website, something that you fix on one page will impact a bunch of pages because it's often your header, your footer, or some JavaScript you bring in that you're sharing across all your pages. But what's nice about Google Search Console, you can check the whole site at once and get everything fixed up, like we did here for answers. Final, just sort of one last thing. Here's Google's page, right? Clean, simple page. Right here. This is their own Google Page Speed on this, at least at the point in time that I took the screenshot. So 43. Not that great, right? It's red. But they did pass Core Web Vitals. All right. What matters here? Core Web Vitals. The page speed thing, there's a lot of tracking, different things going on with Google here. But that's their own testing their own homepage. If anything was going to get 100, if they really thought that was the key, I'm pretty sure it would be 100. But the Core Web Vitals is what really matters. So just those 3 elements, right? The initial paint, right? How the largest paint area, right? How fast it is you click on something, how responsive things are, things like that, right? Just gotta make sure you're on top of all those different items. Don't have things moving around, shaking in your page loads. Don't be like law.com on that. And finally, go to web.dev. They have lots of information. This is all developers should look at the site. This is put together by Google. Lots of information how to make your website better for optimization, usability. There's a lot more stuff here than just Core Web Vitals. It's a really good site. Lawyers can read it if they want. A little bit technical, code samples and things like that, but it's really quite good. All right, Core Web Vitals, the biggest thing. I want to briefly talk about accelerated mobile pages and speed, and then I'll go on briefly talk about WordPress and then run through the rest of this webinar. All right, so AMP, this accelerated mobile pages. The key thing here is they're lightweight and they're optimized for mobile phones and mobile devices. So this AMP site somewhat works with Google. Here's Google's specific stuff in their AMP on Google part. The key thing with AMP is that basically it's like, you have HTML pages, you have AMP pages. They're basically just formats of how, just web pages, how to show stuff to a browser. And AMP, for the most part, is just sort of a smaller, cleaner version of a normal website. So here's a normal website. Most people have responsive websites, right? You make it bigger, you make it smaller. It's all the same content from a desktop to a phone. It's fine. It's just your browser gets bigger, smaller, works on all devices, right? Most folks have responsive sites these days. Here's the mobile version of my responsive site. Here's my AMP page. So slightly different. There's certain limitations I can do on AMP, certain things that I can't do. It almost forces me to make things a bit simpler, to just so it loads faster on the phone. So, which is fine. Is AMP in and of itself necessarily going to make you rank higher or be faster? No, you can make a real simple HTML page and it would be the same as AMP. There's no reason you couldn't have, these things be pretty much the same if I wasn't trying to do extra stuff with the HTML. So they could. It's not, AMP in and of itself is not necessarily going to make it faster, but by doing AMP, you'll be forced to be faster because you can't do some of the crazy stuff that you can do with HTML, right? So that's just something to note. Here's where you can do something on AMP that you cannot do on HTML, and that is be in the Google AMP cache. So here's Google AMP cache, right here. This is the big thing. So Google will basically take copies of your AMP pages and put it on all its servers. So you come in here, you've got your website, right? You make your website. This is the responsive website. This is the mobile version. I make AMP pages on my website. I make a full duplicate copy of my website with AMP, right? It's a duplicate copy. There's ways to associate it with, so Google knows the main core content, and the one that's sort of owns the sort of the space and everything is in terms of the text and content is the main HTML version of it. But and that's again some tagging and stuff. It's a lot more technical we need to go in today. But your developers, if they know how to do AMP, they'll know how to do that. So there it is. There's the AMP version. And then here's the AMP version on Google. All right. So this is a copy of your AMP site sitting on Google. And you can sort of see there's a link back to the back to your website right here. You technically could actually show your URL here, although I don't think it's bad to be associated with Google. They have the Google URL. But anyways, I wanted to show you this so you can see the Google URL here. This is a copy of the website sitting on Google. You go, well, that's great. So it's AMP. It's sitting on Google servers, so it's going to load faster, right? Because there's a lot of servers. You got one in San Francisco and Seattle and Denver and Boston and DC and Miami and Dallas. They got servers everywhere, and all these copies of your website are everywhere. So what does that mean? All right, well, I'm going to do a Google search here, Boston criminal lawyer. All right, get through the ads, get through the maps. All right, here we are to the organic results. So there's Justia, which is good. Justia is an AMP page. What's going on is when I'm looking at the search results right here on Google, my AMP page is actually loading into my phone. So even while I'm sitting here, I'm scrolling around, I have to scroll to get to the organic. All the AMP page, not just my AMP page, any AMP page that's on this organic search results is actually loaded onto my phone or prefetched and is sitting on my phone. So if I click on it, it's going to be immediate, right? Super fast. Good for everything. Good for Core Web Vitals, right? So, okay, well that's good. So here it is, and there you sort of see the Google there, right? So it preloaded on. Here's another one, Steve Nyman. Okay, there's Google. Patrick Murphy, Google. Let's go to the next page. Solkind, Google. Serpa, Google. All right, and then final. So especially for mobile results, right? Desktop results are sometimes slightly different than mobile, but most searches are now done on mobile phones. I'm not saying these guys are all ranking great because they're on AMP. They also have great content. These guys have spent a lot of time on their content. They're competing with each other. But AMP gives them an extra edge on mobile devices and on mobile searches. And just to make clear, that was the top 5 results all showing AMP. That's not a coincidence. Some of these others, Simon's not a bad site, but it's the AMP gives them an extra advantage on mobile. So all things being equal, you'll do slightly better. And the reason you're doing better is because you're sitting in the Google cache and it's loading immediately. Not because it's AMP in and of itself. It's because AMP is the only way to get you in these Google cache servers so that your site can load while you're looking at your Google search results and they click on it's immediate. It's good for you. It's good for Google. Like if you click on something on Google phone on your phone on a Google search result and it doesn't load for a while, you're angry with Google. That's whose logo you're looking at while you wait. You don't know why this other site's not loading. You just go, why did Google give me a site that doesn't load real fast? These other ones, immediate. I mean, it's so, AMP is good for speed. AMP is good for user experience. I mean, you should do AMP pages, right? It's a little bit hard, but it's doable. So I would encourage you all to do AMP. It's, not saying every top search result on phones on as AMP page, but it helps everybody. Same thing when they show you an AMP result page, I click on it, it would actually just take me to my HTML version of the page. So it takes me to my HTML core version. You could have a website that's just AMP pages if you wanted to. You can do all types of things. It's just, get more narrowed down. But the Google cache, that's non-trivial. That's extremely valuable to you. So make AMP pages again to the Google cache. Final thing on AMP on Google in particular, analytics. Right now, they're they're still using universal analytics. We all know that's going to be something. Well, not everybody. It's going to be sunset. They've moved to Google Analytics 4. So there's a new Google Analytics that you have to move to, and you have to get ready for that. And they don't have, for Google Analytics 4, they have not yet made that. Google itself has not added new tags for AMP pages. But there's a guy named David Vallejo. He's gone ahead and done it. This works fine. You can modify a little bit, or your developer can modify a little bit if you want to. There's also a plugin that he's worked on for WordPress. All right. I know a lot of people use WordPress. So you can get Google Analytics 4 working with AMP. So that shouldn't be a reason that you don't use it. All right. And Google will eventually get to it. Final thing with WordPress plugins and usability. A lot of people use WordPress. We build things on WordPress. A lot of plugins. WordPress is a content management system, right? It's a way to enter content in. What you do in terms of producing your website, the export, will depend on a number of different things, right? It's just because you use WordPress in of itself doesn't make it great. Right? I know Google does some stuff with WordPress. They've been trying to help it because there's so many websites with WordPress that they're trying to help them optimize things. But there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's you can make static pages. You could have super fast caching of your database, and there's a lot of plugins. So you need to know what you're doing with WordPress to actually get it to really be fully optimized and get the best user experience for it. The one thing that does jump out a lot of times is people using random plugins to do things that aren't really helpful, especially plugins that are pulling data from the database itself while rendering the page. And that leads to pages loading slower. That leads to sometimes things jumping around. If you have a little, like, here are the last 10 visitors to my website, I'm showing the IP addresses of them, and that element, delays before it loads up. And suddenly everything moves slightly, the content shift that you don't want to have. Different word clouds that you're trying to pull in recent search terms and stuff. There's ways to optimize some of this stuff, but a lot of times you got to be careful what plugins you use. Just because it's WordPress doesn't mean you can put every plugin and you're still going to be fine. So you really need to focus on how you optimize it. You've got to pass that Core Web Vitals. You need to make sure and Core Web Vitals, part of that is making sure your website's fast and clean, and some of these plugins get in the way of it. There's also other issues with plugins, security, and different items like that you need to be aware of. Hopefully your developers on top of that. But the main thing is, just because it's a plugin in WordPress doesn't mean you can just start using it. You really need to think it through and really try to do what's best for you to optimize the user experience using WordPress. WordPress, great way to put up content. Easy to use. A lot of people use it. It's nice to get exports of your core content. You can move it around, add new templates. But you got to be careful exactly what you do with WordPress because it's not optimized out of the box.
Thanks for watching. Now you have a better understanding about the importance of Core Web Vitals performance for your website. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more law practice and legal marketing videos.